Hello, welcome back to another Rogue Report. The first Rogue Report since the Great Purge. Actually, I guess the first Rogue Report with this really awesome background that's actually from the game. Whoopee. It's of course the May development diaries, what we're covering today, and it's pretty cool. Obviously, this is kind of all about stuff that's happened internally. I guess hybrid, really. It's public/private, because obviously it's to do with the closed alpha and what they're doing now that the first playtest is kind of concluded. There is something about how the closed alpha is not actually going to close for now. I'm assuming it will close once the closed alpha's is done completely, because otherwise I feel a bit weird given some recent things I've said. But they're actually not closing it for the people who already are in. They're just going to open it up to more people. But what the juice is really here is all the stuff they're doing that's sort of in the internal second update. For the closed alpha, all the stuff that they're working on that we can perceive as sort of the next round of content to be added onto what we can see that Rogue Core is, sort of the framework, early act, really really early version of Rogue Core. There's a long list of stuff that they're working on adding to that, and we all kind of already think the game looks really good. So this really just helps to clarify what their priorities are, and I don't think there's a single miss here. I will obviously comment on things along the way, but this is sort of really about what they are doing, what the feedback is, and what their priorities are. So it's a really informative and constructive post, I think. This is basically, in a lot of ways, probably one of the best posts they've made in years, to be honest. Because it's just so concise and direct and hopeful of what's going to happen, what's going to be brought to this game. Obviously, kind of working with two games at the moment, but also not. It's only really one at a time, but still. Anyway, hello Reclaimers, welcome to the second monthly update for what's going on with Rogue Core. We didn't have the time to make a video for this one, so we're going with old-fashioned words again. I wasn't expecting a video. I don't think there was a video about the development diary last time. I guess there was the Q&A, or FAQ. It was actually an FAQ. In this issue, they'll be covering what we learned for the first playtest, about keeping the alpha running, when the next round of invites is going out, big questions we're exploring, and our plan for the next few weeks. Okay, so we're moving at a quick clip these days, so our priorities may change from week to week. Just worth keeping in mind with these monthly updates, so nobody thinks all this is written in stone and or rock. And all. Until the next monthly update, you're welcome to ask us about development on Discord or on our weekly dev streams. And yeah, so this is kind of leaning into what Ghost Ship are like when they have a really sort of foundation to work with. They're quick. They are really snappy. Unlike what it felt like in the sort of the latter years of them doing seasons for Deep Rock, Ghost Ship can be really fast and really flexible. And there's going to be no one's going to experience that more than the playtesters. So I guess we're not really going to get real first-hand experience, but we will when Rogue Core goes early access. Those updates will be frequent and fruitful. It's going to be exciting. Anyway, just a picture here. I do still think, and I have no doubt that you heard that, an absolute fucking nut job. Basically, kid driving a shitty car. Not that my car's not shitty. Anyway, I like this picture though, because I still feel like this creature is not in the game. I hope I'm not deviously wrong about that, but I feel like it's something that's still kind of work in progress. Anyway, what we've learned so far, these first few days have taught us a lot about how people play Rogue Core, what they like, what works and what doesn't. We're getting loads of useful feedback from playtesters via Discord, surveys and in-game telemetry. Thanks to everyone who's chimed in so far. Part of me almost wish I could do the surveys that they have in the game, like myself, even though I can't play it, which is kind of weird. Anyway, we also found out that the new Steam Invite a Friend feature we tried was somewhat inconsistent. We knew it was in beta, so it was a bit of a crapshoot. It turned out that not everyone got the option to have that +1 invite, and sometimes the invites themselves didn't send or register. This is an issue on Steam's end though, so unfortunately there's nothing we can do about it, and I don't blame them for that. It was kind of a nice thing that they were trying anyway, they're essentially multiplying by 2, doubling their actual intended number of playtesters. Anyway, overall, our impression is that people enjoyed this alpha version of Rogue Core. I agree. I think people seem to be receiving it mostly positively, which we're very pleased to see. But it's still a long way to go before the game is in a place we're happy with. It feels like our to-do list is getting longer, not shorter, as it should at this stage. I think people look at Rogue Core and be like, "Oh, it's not being the DLC allegations." It's like, guys, you don't realize how early this game is, in development. There's a lot of like road ahead, basically. Overall, our impression is that people... Okay, read that already. Now back in another production phase where we hunker down and work on new features. So it's kind of like really like bulk, fast work because they've already got so much stuff planned, and they've also got new plans that are kind of just very quickly formed by player feedback that they can put into action pretty much instantly, which is kind of just like the really cool way that things happen in like early access and sort of even like internal updates and things like that. I find this stuff really cool, even though we don't really get like a true first-hand view of it. Some concept sketches for the rift gates here, which the rift gates were basically the boss like summoning areas. So it's a bit familiar here with like the actual orbs that you would take. I don't know if there's a plan for like different bosses to have different looking rift gates. We'll see. It doesn't look like bosses are a priority for the next update though, so it might be a bit of time before we see more on that side of things. The first playtest is done, but we're keeping it open, like I said at the top. In our eyes, the first playtest is complete. We've stopped updating this current version to closed alpha so we can turn our focus toward further development. Even though the initial playtest has concluded, we've made a decision to keep the alpha open for all those who currently have access. This comes with a stipulation. Don't get too attached to your save files because we have to wipe all player saves when we implement major updates in the future. Fair warning. The next major closed alpha update will hopefully be ready in a few weeks. That'll be our next dedicated playtest, where you can expect another round of invitations to go out. But until that next update launches, we're not letting more people in. So yeah, it's also talking about the fact that you don't keep your progress, which shouldn't surprise anyone because it's a closed alpha. You never do. It's going to be, it's kind of a different, like, not different file, or kind of actually, different like entity altogether as far as like different, it's essentially a different piece of software that they're transitioning to when they put out the actual game, right? So of course you're not going to keep your progress, and although not keeping your progress between even like updates within the closed alpha is not what I expect necessarily, but it's only because they're keeping it open instead of, you know, playtest 1 opens and closes. Obviously, you wouldn't carry over progress between two entirely separate playtests. It's just the fact that they're keeping them open makes them seem as more continuity, but there actually isn't, because as soon as the update happens that represents the next playtest starting, your data gets wiped, or your file gets wiped. Anyway, when's the next round of invites going out? Good question. The honest answer is we're not sure. Loose estimates a couple of weeks. Right now, our big focus is on designing and implementing more features and content in the game. Once we made good enough progress there, we'll package it up and release it as a new playtest, the Update 2 for the closed alpha. We'll send out a fresh batch of playtest invitations there, and everyone who's already got access will of course be able to play it as well. We'll likely send a couple thousand more. Now that's weird, I'll get to that. This will still be a fraction of all the people who have requested access. This is to say your individual chances of getting in are still low. We know this is frustrating, but we just don't need a huge volume of playtesters right now during this phase of closed alpha. It'd be counterproductive for us to manage all that traffic and feedback right now. High volume playtest with a bunch of invites will hopefully come later down the line. That's also kind of cool. It's just right now they're really comfortable that they have like a good variety of feedback, even with a small sample size, but when I say a couple thousand, I looked at the Steam charts for the closed alpha playtest. It said that the peak player count was 117, and anyway, so I know that was just not entirely true, because when you say another 1,000 or a couple thousand more, it's kind of a coin flip on whether or not that implies that they've already had 1,000 people in. I don't think it necessarily does. It just makes it sound like it could mean that. But as far as I know, they've only done like 100 people so far. And the fact that means they're bumping up to a couple thousand, you know. So that's why I'm actually not sure that I'm correct, because it sounds like such a big jump. So I don't know if maybe the number of players I had in already is higher than I realise. Anyway, and also, actually no, that's it. I already said the second point at first. That's the first thing I said. Anyway, got some more sort of visuals here. Actually, what did it say? Draft versions of new scaffolding systems and cave constructions. None of it actually are new. These ones look pretty familiar, but they might be actually. Yeah, maybe this is something we haven't actually seen yet. But as in, it's going to be part of the second update. They're going to be adding plenty more sort of DRG structures, procedurally generated structures. A couple of considerations we're exploring right now. This isn't really like the update list. We'll get to that in a minute, and that's the part I really like. But this is still good stuff. Like I mentioned earlier, this game is still very far from where we want it to be. We think we're off to a pretty good start, but there's still loads to do, and I think most people would agree we're off to quite a good start. I think there's some really, well, everything we've seen is indicating a really strong foundation for something that could become something that's already really cool, but could become incredible. That's kind of the general stance I think on Rogue Core. So their excitement and number of things that they're working on and thinking about is really exciting. Here are a couple of the big picture considerations that we've been discussing a lot lately. So this is kind of stuff they're thinking about, but it's not really tied, not necessarily tied down to the next update. Anyway, we're looking at tweaking and balancing the weapons in Rogue Core to make sure there aren't obvious favourites for what's best or most fun. This will be an ongoing thing. But well, look, some weapons are going to be less fun than others, right? Otherwise, you would just get mush. You just get too many ridiculous weapons and nothing like basic and sort of comforting, right? You kind of need the GK2 to have the I guess field blaster, maybe, I don't know, something ridiculous. This will be an ongoing thing, but because your first weapon pick can have a big role in how you experience a run, it's important for us to keep in mind. Yeah, balancing. We like balancing. I like Deep Rock balancing as well, guys. That'd be nice. There's a lot of UI, wayfinding, and quality of life features yet to be added. As we're working, we're taking notes on what we still need to implement in terms of tooltips, voice lines, and UI overlays that will boost the game's overall user friendliness. This alpha version is hopefully the least user-friendly version you'll see, and it'll just go up from here. And it's already pretty digestible. It just doesn't come across as super like clean or intentional. It's like some things are clearly left over in terms of like just general sort of shapes and like template stuff from Deep Rock, especially like the mission end screen, for example. That's like very not done at all. It's only there because Deep Rock had its own version of that they can just bring over instead of putting in a really shitty placeholder, right? Anyway, cave constructions are in the spotlight for us too, which is pretty cool. We want to add more props and set dressings to give greater detail to the mining facilities to make them feel lived in. Good way to do that, by the way, guys. This is a bit morbid. Add bodies, right? Add skeletons of dwarves, maybe even other human workers, assuming there are any, but like sort of the dwarves and other people who operated these facilities before the blackout, right? Unless the implication is that they've been turned into core spawn. But yeah, like things like that would actually be really cool. It's skeletons and sort of obvious sort of gear, like obvious evidence of death, basically. As morbid as that sounds, I think Deep Rock in general is in a comfortable position, and Rogue Core, especially with its intentionally darker tone, it's in a comfortable position to be as sort of morbid and brutal as it needs to be, without feeling too sort of visceral or disturbing. I think it's actually very difficult to do that with the game's style. So I think they actually have a lot of leeway with what they can put in the game. Sort of, I think about like Halo Combat Evolved, when you have like in I think it was in the 343 Guilty Spark mission, which is the first mission when you encounter the Flood. You can find these rooms where the Flood have been literally dumping bodies like down elevator shafts, but they're sort of just like it's extremely gory, but kind of the cartoonish, well, the low fidelity art style, because of just the time it's made, really masks that and helps it be sort of digestible and not too like disturbing. And that's why I feel like sort of later games almost get like gentrified almost, or sort of toned down, because they're almost too detailed to have the sort of gore in them. But Deep Rock is like sort of a low poly game, therefore like a low fidelity game graphic. Well, actually it's not low fidelity, it's actually very detailed, but being low poly and having this particular art style, I think lets you get away with certain stuff. So I kind of wanted to take advantage of that. Anyway, class abilities and skills still have some room to grow. And by the way, this is like obvious in the sense that they already had a lot of plans for what to do with sort of more upgrades and abilities and whatnot. Regardless of player feedback, this feedback is just going to help them sort of channel the stuff that they were already working on, really. Anyway, we'd like to give each class a distinct sense of power with its own strengths and synergies, so spitballing a few concepts of class-specific skills, or as how the upgrades you encounter during a run support class-specific abilities and playstyles. The one thing, it all sounds good, but one thing I'm not seeing mention of still is directly upgrading your class abilities, and I think that's something that everyone is kind of expecting, but doesn't seem to be in the works, which I think is a little bit confusing, because I think what they've got such obvious sort of ways, obvious starting points for really cool skill trees, essentially, for what class abilities can become, even if that's over the course of a run. Like I think about the Falconeer gaining more drones, have them do different types of things. Like you get another drone that does fire instead of electricity, right? Especially when they talk about all the elemental synergies that they're going to be working on, or like the Slicer having the energy sword release an energy sort of wave when you slash with it, so it's sort of a more ranged component. I know some really basic ideas, basically, but you see what I'm saying. But we'll also get to the fact that they're working on more classes, which is very important too. Anyway, this list is far from exhaustive, of course. Still loads more to explore, both in the short and long term. But down below, we've got more detail on what we'll be working on in the weeks to come. Like I said, the actual list is sort of this list is more so for like that actual upcoming like update 2 for the alpha, right? Anyway, some sketches of environment effects and possible core corruption cave elements. We've seen stuff like this already, and we don't know if this is stuff that's just sort of thrown in sort of flavour in the post, or if this is sort of really like this is sort of newer like concept art for stuff that can come up. I kind of like these sort of like trees that have grown sort of seemingly out of like the corruption. Is that what it says? Core corruption, yeah. So the core sort of spreading throughout Hoxie's. Our plan for the next few weeks. Earlier this week, we made a big list of overall objectives for the game, effectively a wish list of what we want to implement next. A good chunk of this, but not all of it, is focused on that update 2 we talked about. So, without promising that all of this is coming in a couple of weeks, here's what we're hoping to work on next. More stats for the end screen. At the end of a run, we want you to be able to get a detailed breakdown of your mission data, kills, damage, and DPS, and the upgrades that made up your build. Damage makes more sense given that Rogue Core is like having damage numbers out the gate, but obviously it was something that they were actually kind of opposed to in Deep Rock, so that's kind of interesting. Upgrades as well, that's cool. I hope this entails actually making the end screen something, but obviously that will happen before early access. I'm just sort of pointing it out. The end screen isn't a like 100% placeholder pretty much at the moment. And obviously this is going to take steps to alleviate that, but it's still mostly the Deep Rock end screen. Anyway, experimenting with new classes. We've designed Rogue Core to have room for more than 4 classes, and we're starting to work on that part now. Good. I think starting work on that really early is great, and if they can actually have more classes in the game, even in the closed alpha, that's great. I was personally only expecting around 6, I think, on early access launch, so still an even number, but definitively more than 4. But if they're able to crack more classes for the next alpha update, maybe we could expect sort of the the double, right, the 8 on early access launch to really illustrate that this game is more flexible class-wise than Deep Rock could ever be, basically. But it's really good that they're starting to work on new classes this early on, because it shows how built into it is for Rogue Core to differentiate it from Deep Rock. Anyway, class-specific skills and perks. We talked about that a little bit earlier. This is to help each class feel more distinct with their own specializations and strong points to explore. Yeah, but obviously it still sounds like just stuff is like, oh, what stats he can do, like the spotter, for example. The spotter doing crit damage, the guardian having sort of shield or armor elements, which they haven't talked about armor in this. And as far as I know, armor is actually the least positively received part of Rogue Core. The slicer having very strong melee sort of biases. Falconeer, I guess, would be on the side of more utilitarian things, but given that there doesn't seem to be turrets in the game yet, I'm not sure. Or turrets as a weapon, right? Because I would really like to see them do stuff like along the lines of DDIG Survivors, like drone weapons. There's like a corrosion drone, an ice drone, electric drone, and a fire drone. And then if there's any way they can sort of implement that into the Falconeer, that would be really cool. Character audio and visual polish. The main focus here is improving third-person character animations and plugging in some missing sounds. Just a little side project to make things extra slick and flashy. That's fine. It's just basic stuff. Sort of it's on the sort of side of optimization, not optimization. Yeah, what kind of like game feel optimization, not technical optimization. Cooper upgrade system. We'd like the single-player assistance drone to have more interesting options for upgrades during a run to add some more depth for solo players. That's good. I guess that it's kind of quite specific, so I guess Cooper is still going to look like Bosco for now, but Cooper is a focus. There will be this single-player companion like Bosco. I mean, he literally is Bosco at the moment. In fact, I'd be surprised if he doesn't work exactly like Bosco by default. They're just going to give him a different name and probably a different look by the end of things. But yeah, this actually gives him an opportunity to do more interesting upgrades for that AI companion, right? More in-run upgrades. This is actually a very simple one. I think it kind of just, in my opinion, should kind of just say more upgrades. This means more variation in the upgrades you earn during your run. There's more possibilities of funky synergies and unique builds. Yeah, so this is basics, just like we're just going to build on the pool of stuff that we're making. Speaking of which, new weapons isn't a focus yet, but I think it still will be before the end of the alpha playtests. But yeah, it's like, yep, we're going to make plenty more upgrades to give more variety. Already seems to be a lot of variety in my opinion, but at the same time, maybe not like, you know, the 1.0 level variety, but the fact that they're going to bring it up already, really promising stuff. Same goes for more additional Expedite events. This is our working term for the side objectives, like the Ramham event. Like right now, you basically get the same 3 or 4 interactive events during every run, with like more variation, so it's not as predictable. So we're cooking up some new ones. I feel like there are more than that, or maybe some of them aren't really considered events. I think that talking about the ones that specifically give a big shard of Expedite, so they're not necessarily talking about the one that's like a quarry like structure, where at the bottom you can find these like Expedite eggs basically that are buried in the wall, like Jadis, for example, or like an egg, but a bit more like Jadis because they have sort of the fragments that show you where they are. I don't. Maybe they are just talking about the ones that are specifically like big chunks. So the ram hammer, and there's also one that's just like a basic sort of rock cracker style thing. So yeah, so maybe it is that, and they're not. So another one that they wouldn't be including in this might also be the Expedite detonator, who's awesome. I'd love for them to come up with like an appropriate name for him, like another, basically name that one after another Roman general somehow. And I hope he stays in the game. He seems really cool. More mining facilities set dressings. We're making new cave constructions, props, and set dressings to give the mining facilities of Rocore more detail and a lived-in feel. We've already been over that and my ideas for that, so that's fine. UI maintenance and polish. We're aiming to get rid of the last bits of DLG placeholders in the user interface. It's more of a side task, but we're looking at it as we go along. So some of the stuff that's still like that is it's very noticeable. Is like the levels, so even the class level and the player overall level. I don't know if this will entail actually making definitive changes and decisions about those systems. Maybe not, but we'll see. Ramrod renovations. The good ship Ramrod needs more detail and more things to do. Brainstorming is in full swing. Good. It already seems fairly well populated, especially with the fact they've gone for the approach of having like the entire thing be explorable. But there are obviously spaces that need sort of like the facelift. Like the bar, for example, is not really a feature yet, but it's still sort of like there, so you know it will be a thing. So I'm sure they'll work a bit more on that. Ongoing optimization. This will be a constant project, but we're already thinking about it. Hopefully this makes feebler computers have an easier time running Rocore, both in the alpha version and for the eventual release. And I hope so too, because I mean I plan on getting a pretty good PC before Rocore comes out, but I don't know how I don't know how good I'll be with it, if you know what I mean. Like I'm not that tech savvy, even though I should be. There's still much more to be done here, but we're excited about where things are headed, and we're looking forward to sharing it with all of you in the coming months, in the months to come. I basically paraphrased that while reading it, and that was weird. Thanks to your continued interest and enthusiasm in Rocore. As always, if you've got some thoughts or feedback you want to share with us, feel free to comment below or tune into our weekly dev streams and chat with us live. And I will link, I'll link the Rocore store page and their YouTube channel, I think, in this video, but that's about it. Rock and Stone Reclaimers, with love, Ghost Ship Crew. And there you go. I think this is just a fantastic development diary. I really love them going into detail, but like, here are the things that we're working on, and the fact that all of it sounds perfect. In terms of beyond that, the only stuff that's like missing in this is what I mean though. I don't mean like missing as in like why they're not doing this yet. I mean like this, so they're covering so much ground with this next update that what's missing is like it's the only stuff that I would expect from the next update, right? And that's is that, well, it's not a super short list, but it's sort of like bosses, other enemies, new weapons, and tools, and progression. But I think progression is going to be sort of really propped up by all the other variety that they add, especially in sort of things like upgrades. And they already talked about sort of class specific abilities and whatnot, and that will sort of flesh out like what could be available like in the enhancement screen. I already know that there are more meta upgrades in the works. Mike said that. Like there are meta upgrade systems that are not in the game yet. Bio boosters are actually a good example of a system that hasn't really been fully developed yet in the way that they already have planned. So there'll be so much. This game's like going to be. I think it's going to be incredible, to be honest. Well, they didn't mention armor though, which I already said, and I also said that armor seems to be the most negatively received part of the game so far. But I think that's really going to hinge on whether or not they are dead set on it being on not using shields like they were in Deep Rock, right? we'll just have to see about that. Until then, this has been the Rogue Report. Actually, just to really quickly bundle the channel update into a minute's worth of time. The podcast is on hold until Rogue comes out. There's just not enough to talk about. We want to come back feeling energized when Ghost Ship sort of come back, right? So it's sort of like a dual rebirth as such. So we'll sort of main videos on Saturdays, but technically a majority of content is still ongoing. All the new stuff like this will still be going, and Overclock showcases. So there'll still be most of the videos you're used to coming out. That being said, if you want to see more stuff like this and you want to stay on top of everything to Deep Rock and Rogue Core, please make sure to like and subscribe. I should have said that before then. Either way, click the bell if you want as well. Thank you, and I'll see you tomorrow, actually. Bye-bye.